The night I brought our daughter home, my husband measured my hips with a tailor's tape. While I slept, I woke to the cold whisper of metal against my thigh. The room was dark except for the blue glow of his phone, where a web page glowed. Postpartum body contouring, before and after. His thumb rested on a woman's image. Flat-stomached, hollow-flanked, a body that had never housed another soul. I lay still, pretending the weight of our newborn on my chest had not just become a courtroom, and my husband the silent prosecutor. We lived in a renovated lighthouse on the jagged coast of Nova Scotia, a place tourists called wind-scoured and romantic. Locals called it the Widow's Perch. The previous keeper's wife had walked into the Atlantic after her third stillbirth. I had laughed at that story once. Now, with 11-week-old Mira snoring against my breast, I understood how a house could turn hunger into a disease. My name is Elena. Before Mira, I was a restoration sculptor, the kind who rebuilt the faces of saints whose marble noses had been shattered by time, or iconoclasts. My hands knew the weight of chisels, the patience of building a cheekbone grain by grain. My husband, Daniel, was a vascular surgeon. He repaired aneurysms for a living. He liked clean lines, predictable flows, bodies that obeyed their blueprints. We met at a gallery opening where I was exhibiting a piece called Uterus in 3 Seasons, a ceramic triptych showing a womb empty, full, and torn. He called it disturbingly beautiful. I thought he understood chaos. He did not. The first crack came 6 days after Myra's birth. I was in the shower, watching stripes of blood and milk swirl toward the drain. My body was a landscape I no longer recognized. The C-section shelf above my scar, the dark line, linea nigra, still divided my belly like a map of some country I'd invaded and failed to occupy. Daniel knocked. "You've been in there 40 minutes. I said I was fine. He said, "The midwife said you could start gentle core work at 4 weeks. Not how are you feeling. Now let me hold the baby so you can sleep. A training plan." I laughed, then stopped. He wasn't joking. At week 3, he bought a Peloton, placed it in the living room facing the couch where I spent 16 hours a day nursing. "For when you're ready," he said. I asked if he'd asked his postpartum patients to cycle 3 weeks after abdominal surgery. He blinked. "You're not a patient. You're my wife. I want you to feel like yourself again." Myself. The word landed like a stone dropped into a well. I waited for splash, the echo, but there was only silence. Because who was myself now? The Elena who sculpted for 10 hours straight? The Elena who could hike the Cape Split Trail in under 3 hours? The Elena who had never cried because a grocery store ran out of oat milk? That Elena was dead. She had died on the operating table at 3:17 a.m. when Myra's heartbeat dropped and they sliced through 6 layers of tissue to pull a purple, silent girl into a world of beeping machines. I had watched from above, floating near the fluorescent lights, and I had chosen to come back. But no one tells you that coming back means inhabiting a body that feels like a rental, one the previous tenant trashed and left without a cleaning deposit. By week 6, the comments became a genre. "Have you considered a support belt?" My colleague's wife did that cryotherapy thing, dropped 2 inches in a month. "You used to have such a beautiful waist, Lena." The last one was over dinner. I was eating pasta with one hand, holding Mira in the other. Daniel had grilled salmon and quinoa, his specialty, heart-healthy. I had asked for mac and cheese. He said, "We should think about your cholesterol now that you're not burning pregnancy calories. Not we should think about your exhaustion. Not we should think about the fact that you haven't slept more than 90 consecutive minutes since August." I put down my fork. "Say that again." He did, louder, as if volume equaled logic. That was the night I started checking his browser history. I'm not proud of it, but when a man who sews arteries for a living starts measuring your waist circumference with his eyes, you learn to look for the scalpel. The first week, diastasis recti exercises, postpartum girdle reviews, How to lose baby weight fast. Normal-ish. The second week, mommy makeover cost Nova Scotia, breast lift versus augmentation, liposuction recovery timeline. I told myself he was researching for a patient. He was a surgeon. After all, he had colleagues who did plastics. The third week, how to convince wife to get plastic surgery, signs of body dysmorphia postpartum. When to intervene in spouses' health decisions. Intervene, as if my flesh were a stroke, a hemorrhage, something requiring emergency protocols. I closed the laptop and walked to the nursery. Mira was awake, staring at the mobile of carved birds I made while pregnant, each one a different extinct species. The dodo, the passenger pigeon, the great auk. I had thought it was funny, a dark joke about motherhood and loss. Now I saw it for the prophecy it was. The fight started on a Tuesday. Mira was 10 weeks old. I had finally managed to shower and put on real clothes, leggings that fit, a sweater that did not smell like spit up. Daniel came home early, holding a manila envelope. I knew that envelope. It was the same one he used for his surgical consents. He placed it on the kitchen island between my untouched oatmeal and a vase of dying peonies. "Open it," he said. Inside, brochures. A consultation appointment already booked. Dr. Helena Voss, cosmetic surgery. Halifax. Date, 3 weeks away. A list of procedures highlighted in yellow: abdominoplasty, mastopexy, liposuction of the flanks. Estimated recovery, 4 to 6 weeks. Estimated cost, $18,000. "I've already set aside the money," he said, "for my bonus." I read the papers twice. Then I looked at Mira, asleep in her bouncer, one fist curled against her cheek. She had my nose and Daniel's impatience. She screamed the second her bottle was 30 seconds late. She was perfect. She was proof that my body had done something miraculous, something no surgeon could replicate. And my husband had just handed me a catalog of its failures. "No," I said. Daniel tilted his head, the same gesture he used when a resident suggested a suboptimal incision point. "Lena, listen. You're unhappy. You don't look in mirrors anymore. You wear my sweatshirts to bed instead of the silk things you used to love. I'm trying to help you get back to you. I am not a building you can renovate." He laughed, a small, condescending puff. "That's dramatic. This is medicine. You have loose skin, muscle separation. Your breasts are—" He stopped. Even he knew not to finish that sentence. "My breasts are feeding your daughter," I said, "every 3 hours, including the ones you sleep through. I work 12-hour days. And I work 24, without a scalpel, without a bonus, without anyone handing me a brochure for how to fix my face." He picked up the peonies. Dead petals fell like pink snow. "You used to care about your appearance. You used to be proud of your body. Now you won't even let me see you naked." That was true. I had stopped undressing in front of him around week 3, after I caught him staring at my C-section scar, the way he'd study an MRI, searching for pathology. The scar was thick, keloid, a raised pink zipper that sometimes itched and sometimes ached. I had named her Bertha. I talked to her in the shower. "You saved my daughter's life." I'd whisper, "You are not ugly. You are a door." Daniel saw a defect, a thing to be excised, revised, hidden. "I don't want you to see me naked," I said, "because you look at me like I'm a cadaver you're allowed to cut." Silence, the kind that fills a room like water, rising past the ankles, the knees, the chest. Mira stirred but did not wake. The wind outside the lighthouse moaned, a sound the real estate agent had called atmospheric, and I now called the widow's chorus. Daniel sat down. He put his head in his hands, the same way he did after losing a patient. "I'm scared," he said quietly. "You had a hemorrhage. You almost died. And now you don't eat, you don't sleep, you don't talk to your friends. I thought if you felt better about your body, You feel better about everything else. For a moment, something softened in my chest. Fear. He was afraid. I knew that fear. I had held it in the operating room when they put the mask over my face, and I wasn't sure I'd wake up. But then I looked closer. His hands weren't shaking. His eyes weren't wet. He wasn't scared for me. He was scared of me, of what I had become. A woman who leaked, who sagged, who no longer fit the frame he had married. You don't want me to feel better, I said. You want me to look better. Those are different things. He looked up. Are they? That was the moment, the pivot, the exact second when I understood that my marriage had been a sculpture all along, not a partnership, but a project. Daniel had fallen in love with the Elena he thought he could perfect, the wide-hipped artist who could hike and fucking cook and charm his colleagues. When pregnancy remodeled me without a consent, he did what any good surgeon does. He reached for a knife. I took the brochures. I tore them in half. Then I tore the halves in half. The paper was glossy, expensive, the kind that photographs well. It made a satisfying sound, not a rip, but a surrender. Daniel watched, his jaw tightening the way it did when an intern made a mistake he'd have to fix. I'm not going to that consultation, I said. I'm not having surgery. And I'm not discussing this again until you can say the words, "Your body belongs to you," without your mouth tasting like acid. He stood up, pushed his chair back, so hard it hit the radiator. Fine, but don't come crying to me when you can't fit into your wedding dress for our anniversary. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was the ugliest laugh I'd ever heard. A dry, broken cackle that scared Mira awake. She started crying, her small face crumpling like a piece of paper someone had tried and failed to fold into something useful. I picked her up. She smelled of milk and powder and that indescribable baby thing. Hope, maybe, or hunger. They were the same at that age. My wedding dress is in a box in the attic, I said. It has been since the day you carried me over this threshold. I don't want to fit into it. I want to burn it. I want to wear sweatpants for the rest of my life and sculpt extinct birds and raise a daughter who never, ever learns that her worth is measured in inches. Daniel grabbed his coat. You're being hysterical. I'm being clear. You're confusing the two because one of them requires you to listen. He left. The door slammed. Mira screamed louder. I held her and walked to the window, watching his car fishtail down the gravel drive toward the mainland. The lighthouse beam swept across the dark water, once, twice, 3 times. A warning to ships. A reminder that some rocks are too sharp to navigate, no matter how skilled the captain. He came back at midnight. I was in the nursery, rocking Mira, singing a lullaby my grandmother used to sing. Something about a fox and a henhouse and the inevitability of teeth. Daniel stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hair. He looked smaller, or maybe I looked larger. It was hard to tell. I'm sorry, he said. I handled that badly. You handled it like a surgeon. You identified a problem and proposed a solution. You forgot to ask if the problem was mine. He stepped closer. I didn't move. Mira had finally fallen back asleep, her lips pursed around nothing, dreaming of milk. Daniel reached out and touched the edge of the crib. Not me. What do you want me to do? I thought about it. Not about what I wanted him to do. That was a trap, a way of making me responsible for his education. What did I want? Full stop. I want you to stop measuring me, I said. Stop Googling. Stop booking consultations. Stop looking at my body and seeing a before picture. I want you to look at our daughter and understand that she came out of me, that I built her, that every stretch mark is a blueprint, every scar is a door, and every pound I keep is a pound I earned keeping her alive when my own body tried to kill us both. He was quiet for a long time. The lighthouse beam swept again. A foghorn answered from somewhere in the dark, a low, mournful note, like a whale singing to a calf that had already swum away. Okay, he said finally. Okay. But I heard the hesitation. The tiny pause before the second, okay, that meant he was agreeing to my terms, not understanding them. That's the thing about surgeons. They can say yes while their hands are already reaching for the knife. I knew because I was a sculptor. I knew what it looked like when someone measured a block of marble and saw only the statue they intended to free. They never asked the marble what it wants to become. The next 3 weeks were a ceasefire, not a peace. Daniel stopped mentioning surgery. He stopped Googling or learned to clear his history. He held Mira more, took over the midnight feedings on weekends, even cooked mac and cheese once, from a box, orange and powdery, exactly the way I'd wanted. We had sex twice. It was careful, choreographed, a performance of normalcy. He didn't touch my stomach. I didn't take off my shirt. We both pretended this was intimacy, but I saw him watching. In the morning, when I stretched and my belly rolled into soft pleats. In the shower, when he accidentally opened the door to grab a towel. At the grocery store, when he looked at other women, not with lust, but with comparison. Their flat stomachs, their perky breasts, their bodies that had never been ripped open to save a child's life. I saw him measuring, always measuring. The end came on a Sunday. Mira was 12 weeks old. I had finally started sculpting again. A small piece, just a hand, the hand of Saint reaching out a block of Italian marble I'd been saving for 5 years. I was in my studio, the lighthouse's old lantern room, glass on 3 sides, wind rattling the panes. Chisel in hand, dust in my hair. For the first time since Myra's birth, I felt like myself, not the old self, a new self, a self that could hold a hammer, and a baby, and a marriage that was slowly drowning. Daniel came up the spiral stairs. I heard his footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, the walk of a man delivering bad news. He stood in the doorway, holding his phone. "I have to tell you something," he said. I kept carving. The saint's knuckle was emerging, a small curve of stone that would someday cradle a bird or flame or nothing at all. "Tell me." I booked the surgery anyway. My chisel slipped. A flake of marble flew. Not enough to ruin the piece, but enough to scar it. I set down the hammer. I turned around. "You what?" "I booked it. For next month." Dr. Voss had a cancellation. I put down a deposit. Non-refundable. He held up his phone as if that made it official. "I've been doing research. The recovery is easier than they say. I'll take 2 weeks off work. I'll handle Mira. You just have to show up." The lighthouse swayed. Not literally. The foundation was solid granite, but the world tilted, the glass walls bending light into prisms, and for a moment I saw everything refracted. Daniel is a boy, learning to fix things because his mother had died of a botched tummy tuck when he was 12. Daniel is a young surgeon, vowing never to let a woman die for beauty. Daniel is a husband, so terrified of losing me to the chaos of my own body that he would cut it into a shape he recognized, even if that shape was a coffin. "No," I said. "Lena, listen." "No, you listen." I picked up the chisel. Not as a weapon, as a witness. "You asked what I wanted. I told you. You said okay." That was a lie. You've been lying to me for 3 weeks, pretending to accept a body you find unacceptable, all while planning to carve it into something else without my consent. It's not without your consent. I'm telling you now. You're telling me after you booked it, after you paid, after you spent $18,000 on a fantasy of me that I never agreed to become. My voice was rising, but not cracking. It was the voice I used when a museum curator tried to tell me a statue was beyond repair. "No," I would say, "there's always a way. You just have to be willing to see what's already there." "I'm trying to save us," he said. "You're trying to save yourself from a mess of having a wife who is no longer your masterpiece." He flinched. "Good. Let the word land. Masterpiece. That's what I had been to him. A collection of pleasing lines and soft curves. A body he could display at parties and penetrate at night. A sculpture he had commissioned from the universe and expected to remain pristine. But bodies are not marble. They bleed. They stretch. They push out new life and keep the scars like medals. Daniel didn't want a wife. He wanted a gallery piece that would never gather dust. I walked to the window. The Atlantic was gray and furious, white caps slamming against the rocks below. Somewhere out there, the widow had walked into that water. I used to think she was weak. Now I wondered if she was simply tired. Tired of being looked at, measured, found wanting. Tired of a body that had failed to produce a living child, and a husband who had failed to see her grief as anything but an eyesore. I want you to leave, I said. What? Leave. Take a bag. Go to your mother's or a hotel or the hospital. I don't care. But I can't have you in this house tonight. Or tomorrow. Or until you can say out loud, without me prompting you, that my body is mine to love or hate or reshape or leave exactly as it is. He didn't move. You're kicking me out? I'm asking you to choose. The surgery or me. The fantasy or the family. But you don't get to have both, Daniel. You don't get to lie to my face and sleep in my bed and plan to cut me open while pretending it's a gift. He looked at the floor, at the marble dust coating his shoes, at his phone, still glowing with the confirmation email. Then he looked at me, really looked, for the first time in months, not at my hips or my breasts or my scar, at my face, my eyes, the woman who had rebuilt saints from rubble and was now trying to rebuild herself. I don't know how, he whispered. Then learn. I picked up Mira from her bassinet in the corner. She had been sleeping through the whole thing, the little traitor, and held her against my chest. Learn or leave. But don't stand in my studio and tell me you love me while your hands are already reaching for the knife. He left, not dramatically. There was no door slam, no screech of tires. He simply walked down the spiral stairs, one step at a time, and I heard him pack a bag in the bedroom below. The front door opened, closed. The lighthouse fell silent except for Myra's breathing and the distant cry of gulls. I stayed in the lantern room until the sun set. I carved the saint's hand. I did not cry. Tears would have felt like forgiveness, and I wasn't ready to forgive. Not him. Not myself for marrying a man who saw bodies as problems to be solved. Instead, I carved. Chisel by chisel, grain by grain, I freed that hand from a marble. And when it was done, rough, unfinished, but unmistakably a hand, fingers slightly curled, as if reaching for something just out of frame, I held it up to the fading light. It was beautiful, not because it was perfect, because it was real. Daniel came back 3 days later. He had not gone to Halifax. He had not canceled the surgery. That, he said, he wanted me to do if I wanted to do it. He had spent the 3 days with his mother, a stoic woman who had buried 2 husbands and never once asked either of them for permission to exist. I don't know what she said to him. I don't want to know. But when he walked through the door, he was carrying flowers, not peonies, but dandelions, weeds, the things that grow through cracks in the pavement, no matter how many times you try to kill them. I was wrong, he said, not about the surgery, about everything, about seeing you as something to fix instead of someone to hold. I was sitting on the couch, nursing Mira. I didn't get up. Go on. I'm scared of losing you, he said. Not to death, to change. I thought if I could make your body look like it used to, I could pretend nothing had happened, that we hadn't almost lost you, that I hadn't almost lost you. But that's not love. That's a museum. And you're not an artifact. I looked at the dandelions. They were already wilting, their yellow heads drooping. They would be seeds in a day, white and weightless, ready to fly. What are you asking for? A chance. To learn. to stop measuring, to see you the way Mira sees you, as the whole world, not a collection of parts. He knelt down, actually knelt on the hardwood floor, his surgical knees creaking. I don't know if I can do it, but I want to try. And I need you to tell me when I fail. Not with silence, with words, even the ugly ones. I thought about the widow, about the water, about the difference between drowning and choosing to swim. I thought about my scar, Bertha, the door that had let my daughter into the world. I thought about the saint's hand, still rough on my workbench, reaching for something I couldn't yet see. Okay, I said, but the surgery is canceled. Not by me, by us. Together, you call Dr. Voss and you tell her you made a mistake, that your wife is not a patient, that her body is not a before picture. He nodded. He pulled out his phone, and in front of me, while Mira nursed and the lighthouse beams swept and the dandelions shed their first petals, he made the call. His voice was steady, surgeon steady, but his hand shook. I watched him. I listened, and when he hung up, he looked at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not desire, not measurement, wonder. I love you, he said, even the parts one don't understand. I reached out my hand, the one that had carved saints, that had held a baby, that had not yet learned to stop shaking. He took it. His palm was warm, dry, the palm of a man who had opened 100 chests and was only now learning to open his own. We stayed like that until Mira finished eating. The lighthouse wind sang its lonely song. And somewhere out in the Atlantic, the widow's bones shifted on the ocean floor, and for the first time in 100 years, they did not ache.